Hi, I'm Joe McGlynn. I'm the product manager for CodeGear's 3rd Rail product. We're going to take just a whirlwind tour of 3rd Rail, looking at getting up and running as quickly as possible, creating a new project, setting up the server, and seeing our very simple basic project run. When you first launch 3rd Rail, once you've installed it and registered 3rd Rail, you'll see this welcome screen, and it lists some links to useful resources. For now, I'm just going to click the X and close it. You can always return to it by selecting Help, Welcome to 3rd Rail, and you're back there so you don't ever lose those links. They're always there for you. When you first launch 3rd Rail, and anytime when you create a new workspace in 3rd Rail, you have to configure the Ruby interpreters that are available to you. These settings are stored in a per workspace setting. So I already have two set up here. I have JRuby, and I also have the standard Ruby VM. You can either search and add the standard Ruby VM automatically, or you can use add and select whether you want generic Ruby or JRuby, and then browse to the location of either the jruby.bat file in this case, or the ruby.exe file. And when you select that, it'll add any libraries that are necessary, and you'll be ready to go. This checkbox is to show which is the default. You can only, of course, have one default interpreter, and we're going to use the standard Ruby VM. So I'll just leave that as is. Now, to create a new project, there's two ways to get to this. You can either select File, New, Rails Project. What I like to do a lot is use Control-N, which brings up this wizard of all the things that you can create. And by typing Rails, it narrows the scope of the selection to the things specifically for Rails. So I'm going to select Rails Project. I'm going to give it a name, which is just sample. If you'd like to use a different location than your workspace for the code, you can uncheck this and fill this in. We recommend that you keep your project in the workspace. You can select to use the default interpreter or a specific interpreter. So if you'd like to use JRuby, you can select it there. And then under here, you have Rails options. And this will show you the versions of Rails that you have installed, and you can select any one of them. Typically, the default is going to be the highest numeric version, which would be 202. And you can then choose the database type based on the adapters that you have on your system. Remember that in Rails 1.x, the default database would have been MySQL. So if you use a setup like this with Rails 1.2.x and a database type of default, you'll get a MySQL configuration. As of Rails 2, the default is now SQLite. So if you want to be absolutely certain what you're going to get, for example, if you want to use MySQL with Rails 2, you need to specify that. You can then click Finish, and it will create your project for you. Now, a really cool thing about 3rd Rail is that it doesn't try to hide anything that's happening from the developer. So there's no abstraction or isolation from really the metal, from what's going on in the tool. And to create a new Rails project from the command line, you just issue a simple Rails command. And many people like to work this way. You can actually still work this way within 3rd Rail. That's just fine. For anything that you do through wizards in 3rd Rail, we actually decompose that into the commands and the operations that you would do from the command line wherever possible, and actually show you those commands here in this window. This is called the Project Commander. And this is actually a live command line that has code completion, actually command completion, for all of the things that you might want to do in developing a Rails application. So hitting Control Space will show you a list of the commands and then a list of the potential options and parameters to the command. So if we wanted to see the Rails version, obviously we can just do that. So we have our application here created. We haven't built anything interesting in it yet. One more thing to point out in the project commander is that everything that's been created is now hyperlinked. So if we wanted to go edit one of these files directly, we can just click on the link rather than having to browse through the Rails Explorer. And we'll look more closely at the Rails Explorer. The typical thing you need to do when you first create a Rails project is to actually set up your database configuration information. So config/database.yml. If I click on that, you can see it opens directly up here. It's already defaulted the name of the database. I just need to specify my super secret password and save that. And we're ready to go. One of the other things that 3rd.Rail does for you when you create a project is it creates a server configuration. And if I double click on the server configuration, you can see here are all the parameters that we need for a server. So Rails sample for localhost, you can change that if you'd like. Host name is localhost. This is our runtime. Server type, you can choose whether you want to run WebRick or Mongrel. I'm going to choose WebRick, and I'd like this to run on port 80. And we're going to stick with the development environment. Control S will save that. You can also choose File Save. And then down here, you can either right-click and select Start or Debug, or over here you have the same choices in the shortcut bar. Run will, of course, just start the server running in development mode. Debug will start the server in debug mode using the development environment, and we'll look at using the debugger in another video. Let's go ahead and start the server. You can see here booting WebRick, so it's using the server that we specified, and you notice that it started it on port 80. If we come over to a web browser, I'll just hit refresh. Here's our application running live. And if you notice in the background, you can see that every time something happens in the browser, we're seeing the output from the server right here. So as it serves up different images in JavaScript, that's being echoed. So if I click on this and we look at the controller information, you can see all that right there. That's all we wanted to look at in this very first video. I'll go ahead and stop the server. And in subsequent videos, we'll look at some of the advanced features of 3rd.Rail for creating models, some of the advanced code navigation and refactoring features. We'll look at use of the debugger and a number of other things. So thank you for taking a look, and please check out the other videos.